Back in primary school, a lot of the lessons went very slowly for me. The worst one was probably the maths lesson. Sometimes I would enter the classroom and stare at the clock, watching the candles slow down right in front of me, as if out of spite for me. There was one time where things went differently though. I entered the lesson, started doing exercises, and realized after 2 minutes in my head that the bell was already ringing. I had no idea what had happened and quickly forgot about the situation. However, years after that, when this situation has repeated for me in different events, I reflected on how time is subjective for us. Our brains are sort of time anarchists, we could say, because they do not follow any set of rules when it comes to time perception. For some, time flows slower, for some, time flows faster, depending on the events that are around us. Now, here's the deal. After this talk, you will be able to become a time stretcher, which may not sound as exciting as being a time traveler. However, it can allow you to stretch and bend time, making life exactly as you want it to be. Now, to make you guys feel time dilation in a more tangible way, I actually prepared 2 experiments, which are very simple to do, however, will allow you to feel time dilation on yourself. The first one will consist of a series of images coming one after another, and your role will be to just witness it passively. Don't try to count the time on each and every single image, just watch the video, and afterwards I will ask you which one lasted the longest. So then, I'm assuming most of you noticed the unique apple, and I'm assuming most of you actually perceived the apple as the one that lasted the longest. This is called the oddball effect, and it has been well studied in psychology. And the reality is that the apple that lasted the longest was the second one, a normal apple, and it lasted a couple frames longer than the other ones. This is an example of our brains playing time tricks on us. Now the second experiment will be shorter, however it will be just as interesting, and it will consist of a sequence showing objects flashing one after another. There will be 3 objects flashing. Now your job in your brain will be to decide whether the time interval between the first and the second object flashing is longer than the time interval between the second and the third object flashing. I will ask you then to vote via hand raise which one you think was longer. Who thinks that the second time interval was longer, between the second and the third object? So, a lot of people actually perceived it that way. However, in this experiment, both time intervals are the same. And this is called the kappa effect. And while it doesn't work for everyone, it shows how our brain perceives time differently based on factors. Now, after witnessing time dilation in a tangible way, I'm going to show you how our brain is built to perceive time. There are 4 main structures in our brain that actually influence time perception. The first one, the prefrontal cortex, it is located in the frontal lobe of our brain, and it is responsible for critical and advanced thinking, and also making time flow exactly as we expect it to, or at least close to. The second part, the striatum, it is one of the basal ganglia. It is full of dopaminergic neurons, and it integrates dopamine with other systems of our brain, and actually causes time dilation as well. Now the third part, the cerebellum, it is responsible for motor movement, and it also utilizes the olivary nucleus to integrate time and fix our movements. The fourth and last part, the insula, it is responsible for integrating our emotions with other systems, and also make our emotions cause time dilation. So now you know the theoretical part of time dilation in our brains. However, I created a system of 4 main factors that influence time for us that will allow you to understand this in an easier way. So I called it the DNAS system, which may sound fancy, however it just stands for dopamine, novelty, attention, and senses. So when it comes to dopamine, I think everyone here has heard of it, and it is often associated with happy emotions, or emotions in general. Now it is not that simple, because this is actually just one of the neurotransmitters in our brains, and it is responsible for many things. Its floods cause time dilations in our brains. When it comes to novelty, it has been widely studied as one of the main factors influencing time perception in our brains. One study done by David Eagleman from the University of Texas has actually proven that when people, two groups of people, one were shown a video of a cheetah sprinting, one was shown the video in normal speed and the other in slow motion. These people who witnessed the video in slow motion actually perceived the video length as being shorter than in reality. This is because the lack of novelty causes our brains to perceive less things and allocate less emotions to memory creation. When it comes to attention, there have been multiple studies, like the one done by Catherine A. Schwartz from Germany, which actually involved a key press, which was the action, and the tone plane, which was the reaction. People were asked to estimate the amount of time between the key press and the tone. What happened is, the people who were shown a distracting color change in the time interval between the tone and the key press actually estimated the time to be drastically shorter, which means that when our brains get distracted, they perceive time less efficiently and less accurately. Now the trickiest part of the DNAS system, which is the senses, is probably not as obvious as all the other ones. There have been studies though, for example one done by 5 researchers from Harvard and the University of Chicago, which involved applying vibrations to the fingertips of humans. Now the humans that actually were asked to estimate the amount of time the vibration took, estimated the time to be longer, the stronger the vibration was. This proves that the more senses we engage, the longer we perceive time. So now, this talk wouldn't actually be useful for you if I wouldn't present to you a way to utilize the DNAS system in order to bend and stretch and shorten time. So I prepared a simple table which will show you the general strategy for utilizing the specific segment of the DNAS system, and then we'll show you some quick tips on how to optimize this element. In the end, you will be given a QR code which you can scan and take this table for yourself to utilize it in your everyday lives. So the first part of the system, which is dopamine, the general strategy would be here to space out rewards. So instead of, for example, binge watching a show, in order to enjoy it for longer in your time perception, you would want to split the episodes into different days, and this will make your brain perceive them for longer. Some quick tips would be to not let dopamine flood your brain and to split things out in your everyday life if you want time to be longer. Now when it comes to novelty, the general strategy would be to introduce new things, even small things, into your life, which will make time flow longer for you. So if you were, for example, to sit down next to your computer and work, or do something you'd want to feel for longer, so for example, watching a show or playing some games, the general strategy here would be to rearrange objects on your desk, change your PC wallpaper, change the things on your desk, add some new things, take away some old things, to add a factor of novelty and influence time perception. The third part, attention, it is actually very easy to influence as well. However, it may be hard for people who are used to multitasking and not working efficiently. So, something I definitely recommend you to do to improve your attention span is to start meditating daily, or at least from time to time. Because when we meditate, our attention span gets longer, and we actually gain the ability to focus on one thing, even if it's boring, for long periods of time. Now when it comes to the last factor, the senses, this is very interesting actually. In order to make time flow longer for you, you can change the texture and the other sense-indulging things around you. So, if you, for example, have been sitting in the same chair for a very long time, you can change that chair to another chair, or you can change the texture by placing something on it. Something easier to do would be to change the pen you write with to a different one. You can also buy some scented candles and light them, different every time, to also introduce the novelty factor, and this will make your brain perceive time for longer. First of all, the QR code, so you guys can actually scan it. Most of us have been complaining for our entire lives that we didn't get enough time on Earth. We only have 80 years, the universe is like 14 billion years old, we can't do much in 80 years. While it is true we cannot add more years to our lives, we can add more life to our years. Starting from today, you have the tools you need to make your 80 years feel like 1,000 lifetimes. It is only your responsibility to utilize them, or ignore my advice and regret it later on because you feel time slipping away. Thank you.